So hello and welcome to our inaugural ISG Smart Talks podcast. This is going to be a regular event where Steve Hall and I will discuss the many and varied ways that technology is transforming the world of business. Our objectives through the podcast are pretty simple. We want to educate, we want to simplify, and we want to inspire you. We're going to take a different subject each episode. We're going to look at how it's helping to transform the world of business. We'll also be bringing on an expert each episode, someone who's deeply involved in the subject at hand, who can give us their personal and professional perspective on the area. But before we go into all of that, let's introduce ourselves and also introduce you to ISG. So, Steve, who are you? And just in case our listeners haven't heard of ISG, who are ISG?
Great. Thanks, Barry. And I'm excited about the podcast. I think this is going to be a great way to share a lot of good information about business and where we are. So I'm Steve Hall. I'm the American living in Britain. So I've moved over here about a year ago from Colorado. I've been with ISG, though, almost 13 years. And currently I'm the president, so I lead our EMEA business. But more importantly, and the fun job is I lead our digital advisory services business. So as we help think about how clients want to transform and how they do that with technology and outsourcing and service providers, all the great things that they can do to drive operational excellence within their business. So ISG has an interesting history. We've been around for almost 30 years. We were sort of an acquisition company that came together from TPI, that was one of the original founders of the outsourcing advisory business. Then we went through a series of acquisitions where we acquired Compass, who was a leader in the benchmarking business. We acquired multiple research firms, starting with Experton, Sagatech, CCI in Australia, and then we acquired several public sector firms, which gave us capabilities to grow out. And then just most recently, we acquired Allsbridge, I know you came from, Barry, that really brought us in some deep expertise in robotic process automation, network services, and extended our capabilities in the outsourcing space. So who's ISG now? So ISG now is sort of a technology research and advisory company that's taken all these great assets from all of these other firms, put them together in a way that we can really help clients solve complex problems in very meaningful ways.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. We're like the eyes and ears of the technology industry for our clients.
Exactly.
So I'm Barry Matthews. I run our business in Northern Europe. I've been involved in technology consulting for around 20 years or so. I used to run Allsbridge's business in Europe, as Steve mentioned. Also a very proud gadget obsessive person. So I often buy pointless technology which makes no meaningful impact in my life and just gathers dust in the cupboard. And we'll be talking a little bit about gadgets and technology and how they impact our lives later. So today, our topic, it's all about sourcing in a digital and agile world. So how has the world of outsourcing changed? How's it adapted to handle digital technology and agile ways of working? Let's talk a little bit about the topic at hand and think about how outsourcing has changed over the last decade or so. So, Steve, you've been working in and around outsourcing for an awfully long time now. What sort of changes have you seen over the last decade?
Yeah, no, it's good, and probably been working on too long. I wrote my first book on outsourcing in 2005, 2006, when it was just really starting. And what's interesting, and I think the history lesson's important here because it sort of defines where we are today. So if you take the early mid-90s to the 2000s, it was all about scale, and it was the large multinational corporations that were expanding. Yeah. And outsourcing was about expanding capabilities within an organization. By 2000, obviously, we had the Y2K, we had the growth of the dot-coms, we had this big drive for talent. And so for the next 4 to 5 years, it was talent that was driving it. And it wasn't necessarily just talent. We needed large numbers of people to do a lot of simple and complex things. By 2005, though, we sort of moved into this industrialization of IT, I call it, where we sort of said, okay, we're at scale. Now what we have to do is make sure that we have the right processes and the controls. So you saw the rise of ITIL. You saw the rise of IT service management. You saw CMMI adopted at scale across organizations where everybody had to be CMMI level 5. And for a period, call it 2005 to 2015, that focus was important. It was driving organizations forward. but it was impacting innovation. So the common operating model for almost every organization that we worked with at that point was a plan, build, run. So the PBR model said, we're going to plan exactly what we're going to do. We're going to build it. We're going to build it to a set of defined specifications. We're going to turn it over to a run organization, and we're going to optimize it to run at the lowest possible cost. That worked well for a time, but it still suppressed innovation. But if you think about it, the big work then was ERP and SAP, so you were doing blueprinting, other work, where it made sense to follow that sort of model. By 2015, 2016, though, people started really waking up to the whole digital transformation. Cloud was 5 or 6 years old now. We could start self-provisioning our own environment. And we said, how do we shift to a different operating model that still works at scale? So we can't take a Spotify DevOps and say do that in a globally distributed way. But how do you get an operating model within an outsourcing environment that really drives the next evolution? So with that, we really started looking at agile enterprise or product-oriented delivery. This is, how do I create an environment that allows large teams, so thousands of developers, to interact, to share, to collaborate, to better align with the business, to develop products and services, but do that in a way that would scale. So I think if I look back over the last 3 years, we're just at the beginning of what I would call sort of the deindustrialization or the decentralization to really start moving towards enterprise agility at scale that allows us to take advantage of all the capabilities. And we'll talk about it, I think, a bit later, but, there's a couple key building blocks that allowed us to get there. And I think it all starts with the cloud. I think if you wouldn't have the massive growth with Amazon and Microsoft and Google and IBM, we wouldn't be where we are, because that's unleashed the capabilities, the innovation, the mindset to bring this community together. And that's been key to the growth.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. But this level of transformation that we're seeing in the market it's hard to make it work well, right? Moving from a plan, build, run model of working to an agile way of working is complex, especially in large global organizations that have worked in the same way for 20, 30 years, right, that we grew up in. Do you think we're at the point where an agile way of working is the predominant way of working now, and not all organizations, but large organizations are already there, they've made that transformation, or are many of them still working in a plan, build, run way, or are they working in a mixed mode way at the moment, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's still a mixed mode way. I think everybody desires to move into a truly agile way. I know, some of our peers in the market came out with a mode 1, mode 2, and I never agreed with that for a lot of reasons. I don't think you can separate organizations and say, you do the old stuff, and mode 2, you're the cool kids, you do the new stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, human nature doesn't play in. I want to be a cool kid, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I want to do that. So you got to be careful with that. But I think most organizations recognize that if they're going to innovate at scale, and more importantly, learn from their innovation at scale. I mean, the beauty of Agile and DevOps and the technologies are you can release products so much quicker today than you could even 2 years ago. And releasing products doesn't mean that you have to release 1,000 times a week or 1,000 times a month or 10 times a year. But it means you have the capability to learn from those releases and take those learnings to continuously improve. And that's sort of the beauty of it. So I think clients want to get there. I think the challenge, though, right now is they've all read the Phoenix Project way too many times. They've read the books on Agile. Everybody reads the Amazon, Spotify stories on 2 pizza box teams. And they say, all right, I've got 1,000 developers, so that's 10 people per pizza, or 10 people, 5 people per pizza. So I need 100 teams to be able to do that. And they lose the sense that we still work in this globally distributed model. We still have large offshore capabilities. We still have outsourcing that's a key component. And quite frankly, unleashing that capability is going to be powerful for the industry. So I think the key is how do we bridge those capabilities between I read Phoenix Project, I understand lean enterprise, I'm going to take those concepts into this. I've got this massive workforce that can unleash a lot of capabilities for me. How do I integrate that across the broader market?
Yeah, I agree. And do you think organizations are getting it right? Are they getting it wrong? Are they slow to start and then improving over time? Because we certainly see this, right, in the projects that we work in and where we're helping to advise on digital transformation deals in all of their forms. Some organizations are really good at it and they've taken the right approach first time and made it work. And some have really, really struggled. And they say we're doing agile or we're doing DevOps, but they're really not doing it. They're working in the same sort of way. They're just calling it something different. And that leads to frustrations because it's such a fundamental change in the way of working and structuring and setting up projects or having product teams instead of projects and budgeting in a different way. And as you say, different size teams. So some play at it and just pay lip service to it. I think that they're doing digital and some get it right? Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. I'm going to be very optimistic because I'm just naturally optimistic, though. I would say there's a set of clients and enterprises that really get it and have transformed. And so when I look at the difference between those clients or what was their special sauce, I would say that it was business and engineering led, not program project management led. So unfortunately, what happens in this, because we're still in this industrialization of IT a little bit, you have organizations that are very much still led in a PBR plan model. So you have the top of the organization that says we want to move to agile for these reasons, and they push it down. And by pushing it down, they try to create all the structures that they would want to manage in a traditional plan model. The best organizations that I've seen is when the business and the engineering groups come together and say, this is the product, this is the new way that we want to think, and we're going to self-organize around agile DevOps principles, and then we're going to collaborate with the rest of the organization, so your vendor management organization, your program management organization, your senior leadership, to create the right controls to be able to do that. I think the challenge that I see, though, and those organizations do very well, by the way, so that's good. The challenge is, how do you take those and all of a sudden take an organization that has a $300 or $400 million IT budget or $1 billion IT budget and still maintain all the financial controls that you realistically have to have and maintain all the contractual controls that you have. So if you say you want to go fully agile and you're going to go sprints or Kanban, it doesn't really matter the approach, and you want to have multiple releases on these time scales and you want to think about software development differently, you want to auto-provision your own environment, you want to bring up environments and down environments, that has a big financial impact. So the trickiest part that we've seen with clients is managing the financial aspects of it. So how do you actually get the budget aligned to what you're doing, especially organizations that are heavily CapEx and are now moving to an OpEx environment? And then how do you do it from a contractual standpoint? How do you go to somebody, a TCS or a Wipro or an IBM or a DXC and say, okay, I've paid you over the last, 10 years on a fixed price basis based upon the amount of compute you have or the amount of storage or the number of apps you're supporting. But now I want to go to this agile thing. Yep. Now I want you to create these pods and I want to pay you on outcome base. Everybody's scratching their heads until they say, what does that mean? Good news is we're conquering those issues, but it's as big as cultural change, Barry, as anything on how organizations have to think, and then putting in the real work to get the constructs aligned to that thinking.
Yeah, I agree. If you think about just the way that contracting, as you touched on, has changed, we're all used to this world of really well-defined requirements. The client works on the requirements. They decide exactly what they want to have built or supported. They define it in a document, and then the DXC or the Wipro or the IBM or the TCS or whoever then respond to that requirement with how they're going to deliver it against what the client wants, and then you contract for that. And we're now working in this completely collaborative world of co-innovation. And that's a completely different way of working. So the client doesn't always have the best idea of what they want, right? So they don't necessarily have tightly defined requirements. They just have an idea of what they want the outcome to be. And then they want to go to market to find the right provider or number of providers who can work with them collaboratively, co-innovating to get to a minimal viable product. And then they might fail fast and they might change their minds on what they want, or they might ideate, terrible word I know, iterate and work together to define what it is that they want ultimately to build. Contracting for something that you have no requirements for is very, very hard. What do we see as best practice in contracting for Agile, or in the world of Agile and digital?
Yeah, brilliant explanation of what's going on. It's interesting, though, because I think right now service providers love where they are, because I think we're in a place now where when we talk about lack of innovation and lack of ideas, we've created an atmosphere now where we encourage innovation and we encourage ideas. So we're actually putting the right organizations together to truly collaborate in unique ways and really use design thinking and what we call future source and other capabilities to really drive a high level of collaboration. I think what you have to start doing is two things. One, you have to be able to define the outcomes. And the outcomes really have to be associated with the business outcomes. We want to move to trust as a service. So what does that mean? We want to move to farming as a service. So what does that mean? We want to drive connected cars and autonomous vehicles and have a data center rolling down the highways as we go forward. So what does that mean? And what are all the creative ideas to drive that? But you have to tie that together with some real contractual obligations, right? So one of the things you should do is say, how much am I willing to invest in this product? So shift completely from a traditional IT way of zero-based budgeting up to, say, almost an R&D perspective. What do I want to invest in this product, and what would I expect the outcome to be? So let's say I've got a product and I want to do thrust as a service, and I want to invest $50 million in the technology platform to do it. Well, with that $50 million that I set as my investment, I should have some outcomes that I expect. But I'm going to learn along that way. So you may get along the way and say, okay, I'm going to invest $50 million, and I expect a return of $75 million, whatever the numbers are. So how do you contract for that? And what we see is by taking that sort of approach, you can now say, well, how would I organize that? So here's the components that I would need. I need a front end. I need a data analytics component. I need IoT to connect the devices together. I need to be able to take all that data and make some meaningful dashboards, some intelligent insights from it. So I've got a set of teams. I've got maybe 10 pods, so 70 people, for example, to create that. I'm going to essentially take those teams and empower those teams driven on the outcome for their bids that all tie together. But we're going to set some expectations on what we think the throughput of that should be. So whether it's use case points or story points or things that align with the outcome, we want quick returns. So we'll go and we'll say, let's do sprint releases where every 6 weeks or every 4 weeks, we're going to have a release. And that release is going to drive us further to the end product, but we're going to be able to constantly measure success. Some banks that we've been working for where we've taken the same approach. It's a really great way to describe the end outcome, but measure success along and contractually obligate everybody in this new collaborative way. I think if we try to use fixed price or T&M or some of the other methods, no one's going to be happy with the results, right? It's hard to fix price something that you don't know, right? So when you go into new territory, you automatically say, okay, I got to spend some time discovering. I got to look around. I got to figure out what's here, what's not there. I got to be a little bit of the Mars Land Rover, right? I got to be able to explore and figure out, and I may not get there tomorrow. It may be, 2 days from now that I get there. But as we're thinking through that, we're going to constantly learn and apply that back. And so you need this flexible contracting mechanism to be able to enable that to do it.
Yeah, I've seen it referred to, or one example is the cone of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So when you're, let's say when you're courting with different service providers and you're not sure exactly how you want to contract, then you may do a 100% FTE based model as you're working on an MVP. When you've sort of down selected, we carry on with that analogy, and you decide to get engaged and work with work with one or two. Maybe if you carry on that metaphor, you should only really be engaged to one. Then you change that contracting model, right? You might have some which is fixed based on outcomes and some which is still FTE based. And then when you decide to get married, then you can contract for specific outcomes and specific sprints. And there's different ways of doing it. And of course, there's points based ways of doing it. There's doing storyboards and epics and or just contracting for sprints. But it has really changed the way that we contract. One of the things that you would expect in this agile world, it would encourage more insourcing, more self-reliance from a client's perspective on managing things themselves with smaller teams. But what we actually see is the outsourcing industry itself at a macro level growing year upon year, right? We've been doing an index every quarter for the last 65 quarters.
65 quarters.
Yeah, so we know this industry pretty well, and we've seen, if you take a step back and think macro, we see some real trends. And we're seeing the outsourcing industry growing despite this move to digital and agile, and what you might think is more of a reliance on internal teams rather than external teams. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's some conflicting thoughts on this. In general, I would say overall technology spend has significantly increased. So we live essentially in a world now where we have about $3 trillion of spend in what would traditionally be called IT services. That what is really strange is the split of that $3 trillion is really different. So, call it 1.9, $2 trillion of that has really moved over to the likes of Microsoft, Amazon, and the major SaaS providers like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, those. That's changed how the service provider market responds, and it changes clearly how our enterprise clients, purchase and acquire and procure services. The other side, the services business is, about $1 trillion, but that includes all of the telco providers, all of the big multinationals, all of the Indian service providers, and then all the small ones. So you see this big disparity in the market. Even though it's a $3 trillion market spend, there's lots of opportunities. The traditional outsourcing market has been relatively flat. It's been growing at about a 3.6% rate over the last 5 years, and it's been problematic for a lot of the bigger service providers. Small ones, though, have been doing exceptionally well, growing on average 12 to 15% during that period. So what does that mean? What it tells us is essentially that you have to be flexible, you have to be agile, that's sort of the word of the day, and you have to have some niche capabilities to really draw that out. Those organizations that are able to do that and really are focused on business outcomes, and even what I refer to as micro verticalization, actually helps them achieve where they can take solutions. And I'll use an example with data analytics because that's always a great one that we talked about. If we apply data analytics with GIS, so geographical or information systems, and be able to drive things from geography, navigation, etc., we could apply that to wealth management. And we could take big data and say, okay, who should I target for a company, for a wealth management broker, those types of things, right? It's kind of a cool problem to do. When you break that down from an agile standpoint, you can start seeing niche providers that bring those capabilities because they're so flexible and so adaptable. The challenge on the top end of the market is all of these contracts that have tied them into, 5-7 year deals with assets in play. Now, luckily, as we'll hear later, those deals have come down an average of 3-year terms now. The ACV and TCV, annual contract value and total contract value, have come down, which have added a tremendous amount of flexibility. But it's also added some inherent risk or systemic risk into it because of the amount of churn that's taking place there. So I think as we go through those things, those mega trends absolutely impact sort of what we're seeing on the ground with some of the deals.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the whole landscape has completely changed over the last few years. So having the big as a service growth and the big as a service providers, as well as the traditional market working in tandem, it just means it's a completely different dynamic and a different environment to work in, and that changes the way changes operating models, of course. And I often say that it's, if you take new technologies and new service providers and new ways of working and try and put them into a traditional operating model for a business, it's like putting it's like putting a jet engine into a Wright brothers plane, right? It'll never work. You've got the brand new and the old trying to work together. That just doesn't work. So operating
models, not going to support it.
Exactly, have to change. But the way you select service providers to work with has changed. And we have our future source, methodology. If you think of the way that we used to help our clients to select service providers with whatever the methodology at the time was called, and I used to work at Allsbridge and Source before that, and you were at TPI. We had different names for it. Right? We now have Future Source, but we're able to use big data, to use quantitative analysis, and then qualitative expertise through a methodology which has 3 5-week sprints in an agile, right, in a digital agile way of working, to get a client from requirements in a collaborative way through to contract signature using the ecosystem or digital ecosystem of providers they want to work with within 15 weeks, within a 3 to 4 month time frame. That was unheard of 10 years ago, right? We were looking at 9 to 12 months for big global deals as something that was rapid. Now we're doing it in 3 to 4 months. That's completely changed the way we think about the entire industry, the ecosystem of different service providers. And it's that proliferation of different smaller, larger ecosystem all trying to work together, which requires a completely different way of thinking about the market, right?
I think what's so interesting about your example, and it's actually another use of data analytics, is for an individual advisor to try to understand the entire market is absolutely unrealistic in today's market. It's too complex. So I think as somebody that's been an advisor for a long time, it's hard for both of us to say, I don't know what I don't know anymore. Right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of the nature that we're in, but that's the beauty of analytics. So when you take things like ISG's IPL, for example, ISG provider lens, or our candidate provider qualification process, what it does is bring lots of data together in a very analytical way to help bring out those things that we just can't store anymore. If we're tracking 2,500 SaaS providers, 130 different service providers, and each of those different service providers out there have all sorts of new capabilities that are constantly coming out, it's too much for an individual advisor to understand, right? So it's the power of analytics, the power of the data combination, but it also means, more importantly, that the client doesn't understand. So the days of being so prescriptive that sends an RFP to a service provider that says, this is exactly what I want, those days thankfully are over. Because now what you want to do is you want to describe a business problem or a business outcome. This is what I'm trying to achieve. How would you let me, how could you help me do that?
Yeah.
So we don't even go through and identify the thousands of pages anymore that go through and describe every aspect of the deal. We sit down with a very small set and said, here's the business problem that we're trying to solve. Let's discover ways to do that. Yeah. And that changes the mentality, quite frankly, on all 3 sides of the table, with the advisor, the service provider, and the client. It makes it so much more collaborative. More collaborative you get, the more the creative juices flow, the more you get a real solution to the problem that's not a price solution.
Yeah.
Which is the beauty of it.
Yeah, well, we're using big data, right? And it's almost my worry with digital technology is sometimes it dumbs us down as people, as humans. It's like, I used to remember my friends' mobile phone numbers, and now I remember no one's apart from my wife's mobile phone number because I use a mobile phone and it's got it programmed in its memory. I used to be quite good at geography and be able to get myself around at least the UK, and now I just put a postcode into my sat nav and I could be going to completely the wrong place, as I have done in the past. And it's a bit the same being a sourcing advisor. We used to work with clients and they'd say, Barry, I've got an infrastructure deal. Who's best in the market right now? And I'd say, it's probably one of these two or three. You should get them in and have a chat, and then that would lead to an RFP, right? And then that changed to, what's ISG's perspective on infrastructure providers? And we provide them with some research, and And now, of course, we rely on big data. We rely on the providers themselves in all of their shapes and forms to provide data to us. So we can then use AI and big data to quantitatively look at the specific exact best fit for a client's requirements. And then, of course, we add some intelligence, some humanity and some nuance to it. But we're able to do that combination, or bring that combination of big data, quantitative, and human and intelligence and qualitative, and fuse the two things together to give the client the best result, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your examples, I think it makes us better. I used to do the same thing. I used to memorize all the phone numbers, and I couldn't even tell you a phone number anymore, except probably my home phone number when I was 13 years old on a landline that you ring dial, right, which doesn't even exist anymore. But I think freeing us of that has allowed us to do other things, right? So, left brain, right brain thinking, we can be much more creative because we don't have to store phone numbers. I can just hit Siri and say, call my wife, call Barry, do whatever we want to do. The same way with so much data, we've made that data accessible at our fingertips, so it's no longer as important to store that. I think it'll actually be interesting with millennials to study how the brain has evolved and changes, where you don't have to store navigation information. You don't have to store, phone numbers, mathematical information anymore. It's just so accessible in good ways, I think. I think it frees up other parts of the brain for other things.
I think, the future of the sourcing industry will inevitably be like with most things, be platform-based and be data-driven in the future. And not in the not too distant future. And we obviously have a number of platforms ourselves. We help our clients to make the right decisions. But you can imagine a scenario where you're able to speak to a platform to say, these are my requirements, in the same way that you speak to, I won't say the word Alexa because it might or Siri, because they might interrupt us. But these are my requirements, and immediately you're able to see the specific exact fit for your requirements, have a contract template, the right commercial model, and everything predefined to meet your specific requirements. And all of the bit in the middle is done through a platform which relies on big data, AI, algorithms, matching. And as you say, that will then free us up as humans to add more value and creativity elsewhere. We see it in RPA, we see it in all the cognitive tools, and we see it in our social lives as well. But it's the question to me is what we end up doing, what we spend our times doing, and do we our time doing, or the time that's been freed up, and do we spend it on more value add things?
So my I agree with the vision. I do get concerned a little bit about the vision, though, especially on the platform play, because I think the beauty of where we are right now in the market is we've intentionally made room for this collaborative design thinking approach to really talk about the solutions and the art of the possible. I think humans are really good at that. I think humans are really good at getting up on a whiteboard and drawing and thinking and sharing thoughts and growing off each other's ideas to take it to the next level. If we try to do all the matchmaking on a platform and say, here's my business problem and here's the 5 service providers that meet it and here's the outcome, I think we're going to lose something. If I'm on, I've been married for 30 years, so I'm not going to be on, any of the dating sites or Matchmaker or anything else like that. But if you choose, matchmaking.com or what, I don't even know what they are, right? We'll call it farmers.com or whatever.
I'm sure there is one for farmers.
I'm sure there is one. Farmersonly.com. If you go to any of those and match, you still go through the whole dating process to look at your example, right? You're still going to meet for the coffee and you're going to say, well, you're nothing like your profile. How did we ever meet, right? And then you're going to go on a second date, with somebody who's, we're much more closer, but you still go through that human interactions of understanding, right? Imagine a world, where you go on matchmaker.com or whatever it is, and here's your perfect fit, Barry. Never met. You're all set. Let's go. you probably don't want to lose that human element in the sourcing piece as well. You still want that creative piece, that how do we go forward? How do we create something unique here?
Yeah.
And build that relationship, which is so important.
Yeah, it would be a shame, wouldn't it, if we just left everything to technology?
Exactly.
It would be a real shame. I always think we need to use technology as an exoskeleton, right? So that we can do things better, faster, quicker, but still keeping the human element and people at the core. And I think
it makes us better. Absolutely.
Yeah, whether that's in our personal lives or our professional lives.
Yep.
I agree. So let's take the conversation slightly different angle or direction. Every week we're going to ask the guests that we have 5 questions about technology. So let's ask ourselves those 5 questions. And when we've done all of our podcasts this year, we'll have a year in retrospective or review, and we'll see what the answers to the 5 questions are. We'll ask the 5 questions every episode. So let me ask you the questions, and then I'll give my answers as well. So the first one is, which technology has had the biggest influence on your career to date, and why?
So this is a silly one. I think the biggest technology on my career today would have to be the Kindle or the iPad with the Kindle reader. Now, I'm a geek. I absolutely love to read. I probably read 100 books a year. Carrying that many books all the time and dropping them and losing them and everything else was a disaster. I travel 300,000 miles a year. I've got my Kindle. I've got all my books. I highlight, I reference, I bring things back. I mean, I'll even have just, reference manuals. I've got the whole Safe 4.0 reference manual on my Kindle, right? It's made me so much better because, one, I just love to read, absorb a lot of content, and it's so accessible to me. So simple, 99, under 100 pounds, but it's brilliant on how I use it.
Excellent. Good. I think mine would be... So I started out my career in software training, and I started training Windows 3.11 and Windows for work groups, and then Windows 95 came along after that, and so I really learned technology. I'd done an IT degree, but I really got into practical technology in Windows 3.11, and then when NT came out, I was then involved in big programs rolling it out. So that had quite a big impact on my career. And then the other one would have to be RPA. I got involved in the RPA world back in 2011 and have been closely aligned to it or working in it ever since. And seeing this really simple technology, I always used to say it's brilliantly simple and simply brilliant, right? Because it was so simple. And I thought to myself, this technology, which I don't think was even called RPA at the time, it has the potential to have such a big impact on the BPO industry. Because I'd just done a BPO deal, had seen what the guys offshore were being asked to do by following simple steps, and saw the potential that RPA had to transform that industry. And obviously we're seeing it now all of these years later, but I'd say RPA's had a big impact on my career.
Okay, that was a brilliant answer. I need to change mine back next week.
So second question, what technology promised much and delivered least, or promised most and delivered least, or promised much and delivered little? And I'll give you while you think, because I have had to think about this myself, and being as a gadget freak and buying lots of gadgets, the one that I thought would have biggest impact, or the area, was smart technology in the home. I thought I'd be taking things out of the fridge and they would automatically be scanning them and reordering them, and I think we're years away from that. It's clever to be able to get the curtains or the blinds to go up and down, or the curtains to draw, using technology, right? Or the lights to dim. But you can do it, and I can do it, but I never use it. And so I've got lots of gadgets in the home, which I thought would make my life so much easier, but I never use them. So that to me has been the biggest disappointment so far. I've no doubt that will change over time, but so far that's been a bit of a letdown.
You are a gadget guy. I have not had I have not made my home smart yet. I have some of the devices. I've got Alexis all over the place, but I haven't made my home smart yet. It's interesting. I think one of the biggest disappointments, I'm going to put this in the corporate world, has probably been ERP. Unfortunately, I think when you look at the millions or billions of dollars that have been spent on enterprise resource planning and MRP systems, I don't think we've moved the ball as much as we thought we would. And when I see the potential of blockchain, IoT, and analytics, and rethinking the supply chain and breaking down some of the walls that ERP was intended to fix, I think that will be a game changer for us. We spent so much time, energy, money in the late 90s through the mid 2000s on SAP implementations and PeopleSoft implementations and Oracle implementations and upgrades. I don't think most clients feel like they have any more insights to their business than they did 20 years ago. Or if they do, they're not the meaningful insights that really allow them to optimize and drive massive change.
Yeah, great answer. I'd have to agree. Having been involved in many of them over the years, I would have to agree. Third question. What technology do you think will have the biggest influence on business over the next 10 years?
Blockchain.
And why? Blockchain, interesting.
Blockchain, hands down. I think what we're going to see, and I think blockchain has some technology challenges that we have to address. And when I talk about blockchain, I'm really talking about the distributed ledger technology, likely coupled with some centralized data capabilities and analytics that we have to get through. If we would have done this podcast 3 years ago, I would have said absolutely the cloud, but public cloud adoption really. But I think everybody gets that now, and I think that's moving at the rapid pace that we would have expected. But I think blockchain can be completely transformational. If you think about, let's just take simple examples. Let's take account receivables and account payables. All organizations across the entire globe spend lots of money creating AR, AP teams on both sides. So you've got a team creating an invoice. I've got a team to pay you, right? Blockchain would trust, you've done some work for me. I pay you for the work. We've all agreed that the work is done. You've bought some goods. You've shipped some goods. I received some goods. It completely disintermediates sort of all of the challenge that we've had on building trust. Now, I'm one that I don't think the technology is fully there yet. I think power consumption is too high. I don't think it's ecologically friendly. I think there's some challenges with how it's being implemented. But I think the distributed ledger technology in and of itself is going to be absolutely fundamental to how we change. I think we're probably 2023 to 2025 before we're there, but I think it's going to accelerate as we go forward.
No, interesting. Although I agree that DLT has got great potential, I don't think it's the big game changer over the next decade. I think that is AI, but more specifically machine learning. Right, when we are right at the early stages of artificial intelligence development. Right, we have broad general AI, but we don't have narrow and deep AI yet. And when the machines that we operate with every day in a business setting can start to effectively think for themselves, make decisions for themselves based on rules, on algorithms, without us having to be there to control them, then I think we'll see the back offices that we know be able to operate with very, very few people. And all of as you were saying, that blockchain can help with, effectively the reconciliations and the matching. I agree. But imagine when you put machine learning with blockchain technology and you get those together, we'll have a transformed workforce. So I think AI in all of its forms, but specifically ML, machine learning, is going to have a transformational impact over the next decade or so.
Yeah, I think that's a hard one to debate, and I would agree with you. It's brilliant. And it's not even a concern, I think the caution to the market on AI and ML to me is looking for a killer app. And I think right now we have people chasing who's going to be the AI or ML leader. And I think what will happen with both is those technologies are going to be embedded in everything. And so every SaaS solution is going to have an AI, a CT, and ML component to it. It's going to be pervasive across how we think about things. So I love the way you've defined it, because it's truly artificial intelligence and machine learning at scale, ubiquitous, included in everything that we do. Not necessarily what some are saying, who's the killer app, who's the third party, what's the stock that I should buy. And so that's some of my concern about how we holistically think about ML right now.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Okay, two more. What's your favorite technology gadget and why? Or maybe maybe you haven't really covered this. I'll tell you what mine is because I know I've been boring you about it. But for Christmas, I got some neurophones, and they are noise-cancelling headphones that are personalised to your hearing. And despite my big ears, I don't have the best hearing. But so you program them so that they are completely personalised to you. They have a sort of an in bit and an outer bit. And the sound quality is like nothing I've ever experienced. Absolutely amazing. I'm now re-listening to music that I've listened to for years and hearing different things at a different level of quality. So my new gadget is the neurophone.
That is very cool. I mean, I love the Bose, but after you showed these to me, I'm going to have to take a look at these as well. They are so cool. I still am a big Alexa fan, quite frankly. So I've got multiple Alexas. I've got the Echoes. We've got the Spots. We have the alarm clocks. We have the TV one. Alexa makes my life so much easier in so many different ways. Got to connect it to my smartphone, add this grocery item, play this song, what's the news, what's this. It's just, I think NLP is going to be another one of those things that it's just so easy, so natural. When I get bored and working from home someday, I'm talking to Alexa. Alexa will give me a news story. All I'll say is, Alexa, tell me more. I'll get the details. It really changes how involved that we can get in things. So again, it's a simple one, but I really love what Alexa has been able to do to change things.
Yeah, that's a technology that really has improved smart home improvements or technology, but really has changed our lives in many ways. The way we now, without really thinking, we just start saying, "Hey Alexa, play me some music I might like." Or order me something, or tell me a joke. I think you're right, and it's becoming more and more embedded in cars, in offices, in the areas that we live and work. So I agree. So last one, who is your technology hero, and why?
So I probably have two, but we're going to do this every week. So
I'm not going to ask you every week. We're going to ask the guest every week.
So I'm going to give you two then.
Okay.
So Alan Turing and Nikola Tesla, both of them for kind of the same reasons. They were both willing to dare, and they both went out on limbs for their beliefs and what they thought they could do. And they were both very obstinate in their beliefs. They were able to drive things despite lots of people, pushing back. I'm an engineer, computer science degree, and those two have had so much to do with pushing technology forward. I mean, I think if, there's some modern ones, obviously, that I really, I think are just absolutely brilliant. But I think those two in general had so much foresight when others didn't. And others couldn't see what was capable. And, clearly what Turing did, during the war was brilliant, not only the code cracking, but really moving it. And even his foresight to say the Turing tests and how we think about computers and AI and the level of sophistication, saying those things back in 1945, 46, 47, unheard of, right? So he was really able to push some things through and was just absolutely brilliant.
Cool. So mine, and I don't think I realized this at the time, but or what an influence he had on my time there. But I worked at GE in the 90s, and I sort of cut my teeth in my career at GE when Jack Welch was in charge. And I find myself referring to things he said or things he did at that time, and I don't think I realized what an amazing leader he was, and what a charismatic leader and full of gravitas he was in his time at GE. And there are so many quotes that he made, and I love the one that's always stuck with me, where he says, if the rate of change on the inside in your organization is slower than the rate of change on the outside in the outside world, then the end is near. And I've always thought that if you as an organization are not changing as rapidly as the world around you, then you're in big trouble. You won't be around. The other thing he did is got me into outsourcing, because when I was at GE, offshoring had just about started, and he made us, and we had a mandate that we had to take a percentage of all of our projects and use our offshore capability. And so it got me involved in outsourcing and offshoring back all those years ago. So Jack Welch would be mine. So Steve, thanks. Have you enjoyed our first podcast?
Barry, this was brilliant. I love your answer on Jack Welch too. That was brilliant. He was certainly a guy that influenced a lot of us in business over the last 30 years. No, I thought the first podcast was brilliant. I'm looking forward to doing this on a monthly basis or weekly basis or however often we do it. And let's continue it.
Great. Thank you very much.